The lights of the Unity Spire never dimmed. The great station hung in empty space, a glittering jewel of diplomacy and trade. Here, representatives from 100 star-faring species walked its grand promenades, their languages blending into a constant, soft hum. For 3 generations, humanity had walked her too. They were the newcomers, the bright-eyed species from the blue-green world called Earth. They were known for their curiosity, their rapid learning, and their charmingly small, fragile-looking STARSHI PS. Park June moved through the crowded hall of the Grand Conclave with a quiet grace. He was a man in his late 40s, his black hair touched with gray at the temples. His face was calm, a practiced mask of polite interest. Beside him, Lee Yuna walked with a sharper energy. Her eyes, dark and intelligent, scanned the room, missing nothing. She was his tactical analyst, and her mind worked like a computer. Calculating angles and outcomes. The mood in the conclave was tense. The threat of the Void Swarm loomed over everything. The Swarm was not a nation or an empire. It was a force of nature in space, a ravenous cloud of biomechanical ships that stripped planets bare. It was moving closer to Concord space, and fear was a scent in the recycled air. Commander Vorlak of the Tarkelian hegemony stood at the central podium. He was tall, his skin like polished gray stone, his eyes 2 chips of black flint. The Tarkelians were old, powerful, and proud of their mighty fleets of gleaming silver ships. The Swarm does not negotiate. Vorlak's voice boomed, translated by the devices everyone wore. It consumes. Our individual defenses are insufficient. I propose, as I have before, the formation of a unified Concord fleet. A single, mighty armada under a centralized command structure. For efficiency. For survival. A murmur ran through the crowd. Many delegates nodded. The Tarkelians were the strongest military power. Their command would be logical. June felt Yuna tense beside him. Centralized command, she muttered under her breath, in Korean, so only he would hear. He means Tarkelian command. We would be giving them our ships, our soldiers. We would become auxiliaries, vassals. June gave a barely perceptible nod. He had seen this coming. The crisis was being used as a lever for power. He waited for the right moment. When the floor opened for comments, June stood. He was not as imposing as Vorlak, but his calmness drew attention. Commander Vorlak's concerns are valid, June began, his voice steady. The Swarm is a common enemy. However, a single chain of command, drawn from a single culture's military doctrine, may be inflexible. The Concord's strength is its diversity. I propose a coalition fleet, a true partnership where each species contributes its unique strengths under a joint council. A few delegates from smaller species nodded cautiously. Vorlak looked down at June, a faint smile on his lips. It was not a friendly smile. Partnership? Vorlak echoed, the word dripping with condescension. A noble sentiment, Diplomat Park, but partnership in battle requires capable partners. Your species' vessels are commendable for their short-range exploratory duties, but they are thin-hulled. Their energy output is minimal. They would be confetti against the Swarm. How can one partner in a dance when they cannot keep time with the music? Soft laughter rippled from the Tarkelian contingent and their allies. June's face remained impassive, but he felt the heat of the insult. Yuna's knuckles were white, where she gripped her datapad. The music of war has many rhythms, Commander, June replied, his tone still even. Perhaps you have only listened to one. Vorlak's smile vanished. Do not speak in poetry when we discuss survival. Show me a single human warship that can withstand a direct particle beam strike. Just one. Then we can speak of partnership. The chamber fell silent. This was the crux of it. Humanity was seen as clever but weak. Their technology was derivative, their martial spirit untested on a galactic scale. They had no great flagships, no legendary battles. June took a slow breath. This was the moment. The orders from Earth Command had been explicit, locked in a secure file that had only opened this morning. He was to issue an invitation if pushed to the brink. He was now at the brink. "Seeing," June said, his voice suddenly carrying to every corner of the silent hall, "is often better than speaking." He tapped his wrist comb, and a holographic image shimmered into life above the central floor. It was a star chart, focusing on the outer reaches of a single, yellow star system, Sol. "For the past 72 of our years," June announced, "in the quiet and the cold of our system's Oort cloud, my people have worked on a project, a testbed for different ideas. A ship," the hologram zoomed in on a nondescript icy dwarf planet catalogued as Sedna. "It is not sleek," June continued, a hint of something harder entering his voice. "It was not built to win beauty contests. It was built to endure, to fight. Before this body decides on surrendering its collective defense to a single authority, I am authorized to invite you to witness a live-fire demonstration of this vessel's capabilities. Come to our home. See what we have built in the dark, not out of a desire for conquest, but from a simple old belief that the best shield is one that cannot be broken." A stunned silence followed. Then chatter exploded. A hidden human project? A secret ship? It seemed impossible. Their technology was monitored. Vorlich stared, his stone-like face unreadable. "A demonstration? In your outer system? This is a diversion, Diplomat Park. A trick." "It is an invitation," June said, locking eyes with him. "You questioned our capability. We offer you a first-hand assessment. Bring your scanners, Commander. Bring your doubt." The insectoid delegate from the Kelvari hive cluster clicked its mandibles. "A practical test is logical. Data from a live exercise is superior to theoretical debate." The aquatic Thel representative bubbled agreement through its translator. "We have only seen humanity's open hand. I am curious about the fist they may have kept closed." The tide was turning. Curiosity and a desire to see the proud Tarkellans taken down a peg won out. Vorlich saw it. To refuse would look like fear. "Very well," Vorlich growled. "We will witness this demonstration. Let us see what secrets the children of Earth have been hiding in their nursery." The arrangements were made. A small fleet of diplomatic shuttles from various Concord species would travel to Sol under temporary safe passage codes. June and Una returned to their quarters on the spire dock. As the door hissed shut, Una let out a long breath. They took the bait. "They think they're going to see a slightly larger frigate," June said, finally allowing himself to lean against the wall, the weight of the performance settling on him. "They think it's a bluff. And when they see it?" Una asked, her eyes gleaming. June thought of the classified briefings, the schematics he'd seen only once. The sheer, shocking scale of the thing. Then Una, the galaxy's understanding of what it means to be human, is going to change. "They call us children. They're about to meet the adult in the room." A week later, the small convoy of elegant alien shuttles dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the Sol system. Vorlach's shuttle led the way, its sensors actively scanning the bleak, frozen wilderness of the Oort cloud. Nothing, his science officer reported. Ice, rock, and background radiation. No significant energy signatures. No shipyards. No vessels larger than a Class 3 comet. Vorlich allowed himself a grim smile. It was a bluff. The human would have to apologize, and his credibility would be shattered. Humanity's position would weaken further. On the bridge of the human lead shuttle, June watched the same scans. He said nothing. He simply opened a direct, secure channel to a set of coordinates that were not a ship, but a point in the heart of the dwarf planet Sedna. "Captain Kim," June said, "they're here, and they don't see you." A voice, calm and deep, came back. "We know. Let them look a little longer. Unyielding spirit out." 5 more minutes passed. Vorlak was about to open a channel to June to demand an explanation. Then, the dwarf planet moved not in its orbit, but its surface. A network of brilliant blue-white lines of energy crackled across its dark, icy crust, forming a vast, geometric pattern. The alien sensors shrieked in alarm. "What is that? A tectonic event?" The Kelvari delegate chirped. "No." Breathed the Thel scientist, its fluid-filled chamber bubbling violently. "Those are power conduits. Massive ones." The ice shell of Sedna began to fracture, not from natural pressure, but from within. Gigantic plates of dirty ice, kilometers across, broke free and drifted away. Light, fierce and artificial, blazed out from the cracks, cutting through the eternal night. And something began to rise. It was not a ship that slid out from a hangar. It was as if the planet itself was giving birth to a mountain of metal. Hull plates, dark gray and scarred from testing, wider than city blocks, emerged. Sensor towers and communication arrays unfolded like black steel flowers. Row upon row of cavernous launch bays, missile silos, and the blunt, brutal muzzles of kinetic artillery revealed themselves. It kept coming. For a full 3 minutes, it kept emerging, until the shattered remains of Sedna floated around it like gravel around a battleship. The vessel was 5 kilometers long, a monstrous slab of armored warfare. It had no grace, no flowing lines. It was all angles, armor layers, and weapon ports. A steady, deep thrumming vibration, felt through space itself, pulsed from its gargantuan fusion drives. On every alien shuttle, there was absolute silence. Scanners desperately tried to process the data. The power output. For a long moment, there was only the quiet hum of the alien shuttle systems and the silent, monstrous presence of the human ship filling the view screens. It hung in the void, a dark cliff face against the stars. Then, the communications channels exploded into a chaos of overlapping alien languages, startled exclamations, and urgent technical reports. The translators in the human shuttle struggled to keep up. Commander Vorlak was the first to regain a semblance of control. His voice, when it came over the dedicated channel to Park June's shuttle, was stripped of its earlier arrogance. It was flat, careful. "Diplomat Park, the scale of your vessel is notable. We are detecting immense mass and power output. But power is not the same as capability. A mountain does not win a war." On the bridge of the human shuttle, June glanced at Yuna. She gave a slight nod, her fingers dancing over her console. "The demonstration is prepared, Commander," June replied. "We have deployed a series of automated target drones at various ranges and profiles. They are programmed to mimic the recorded attack patterns of Void Swarm interceptors. Please observe." The alien delegates watched their sensors as dozens of small, agile signatures flitted away from the Leviathan ship, taking up positions hundreds of kilometers out. They were fast, their movements unpredictable, just like the swarm's skirmishers. On the bridge of the unyielding spirit, Captain Kim Min-seok stood with his hands clasped behind his back. He was a man of steady calm, his face etched with the lines of long command, but not stress. He watched the drone icons on the tactical plot. To him, this was just another drill. They had run this scenario 1,000 times in the dark. "All stations condition green," he said, his voice calm. "Tactical, you may begin at your discretion. Let's show them the first movement, the long-range percussion." At his side, a younger officer, Lieutenant Park Subin, sat at her fighter coordination console. Her heart was beating a quick rhythm against her ribs. but her hands were steady on the controls. She was not launching today, but her squadron was. She could feel the anticipation humming through the carrier's vast pilot. Ready-rooms. The first act of the demonstration did not look like much. There were no brilliant lances of light. Instead, on the alien sensor displays, they noted a sudden, intense magnetic buildup along dozens of barrel-like projections on the human ship's flanks. Then, with a faint flicker of propellant gas visible only on high-resolution scans, a storm of inert projectiles was launched. They were simple things, forged rods of tungsten, heavier than a ground car. They had no guidance systems, no warheads, just mass and velocity, accelerated to a fraction of the speed of light by the carrier's massive magnetic rails. The drones, simulating swarm tactics, began their evasive patterns. It was pointless. The humans were not aiming at the drones. They were aiming at the volume of space the drones were about to occupy. The timing was calculated by the carrier's formidable battle computer. Space itself seemed to shudder as the kinetic rod struck. One moment a drone was there. The next, it was an expanding cloud of superheated gas and fragments. The impacts were silent in the vacuum, but the violence of the conversion of kinetic energy into pure destruction was unmistakable on every scanner. It was not an elegant disassembly. It was erasure. Vorlek listened as his tactical officer stammered a report. No energy signatures. Kinetic weapons only. Impact yield. Equivalent to a medium-class plasma torpedo per rod. Rate of fire incredible. They are saturating the battlefield with low-cost, high-yield projectiles. Before the alien delegates could fully process this, the second phase began. The carrier launched its own small craft. Squadrons of human fighters, dubbed Rooks, streamed from the launch bays. They were not sleek like Tarkellan interceptors. They were angular, armored like tiny beetles. With heavy forward-facing cannons, the remaining drones swarmed to meet them, simulating the swarm's overwhelming numbers. What followed was not the graceful, swirling dogfight of galactic cinema. It was brutal and direct. The Rooks flew in tight, disciplined formations. They did not try to outturn the nimble drones. They absorbed hits on their thick frontal armor, their pilots grunting from the impact shocks, and returned fire with precise, short bursts. Their weapons were not plasma bolts, but hypervelocity slugs that tore straight through the lightweight drone frames. Lieutenant Subin watched her squadron's work, a proud smile touching her lips. "They're like flying bunkers," she murmured to the pilot next to her. "But they are slow," argued the Kelvari delegate over the open observation channel, watching a Tarkellan analysis. "Their turn rate is 40% lower than standard." Lee Yuna, monitoring from the shuttle, answered calmly. "Survivability is a greater tactical asset than agility, delegate. A ship that cannot be killed has all the time it needs to kill you." The demonstration escalated. Larger drone motherships appeared, projecting weak energy shields similar to early Concorde designs. The human response was again different. A section of the carrier's hull slid open, revealing banks of what looked like simple missile pods. "More primitives," Vorlik muttered. But his eyes were glued to the screen. The missiles that streaked out were not smart. They were dumb, solid-fuel rockets. But there were hundreds of them. A swarm to counter a swarm. The drone mothership's point defense lasers fired, slicing dozens from the sky. But the law of numbers was absolute. For every 10 missiles destroyed, one got through. And that one was usually a city buster. The shields flared and collapsed under the sheer, sequential hammering of high explosives, and the motherships were vaporized out. Then came the final, shocking test. A signal came from the unyielding spirit to the observation shuttles. "Please direct your scanners to Sector 7, aft of our portside engine nacelle. We will simulate a catastrophic shield failure and subsequent hull breach." The aliens watched, confused. Simulate a failure? Why? On the carrier's hull, a controlled demolition charge detonated. A shower of debris blew outwards, and a jagged 10-meter tear was ripped in the thick armor plate. Atmosphere, visible as a brief, sparkling cloud of crystals. Vented into space, alarm klaxons would have been wailing on a Concorde ship. On the unyielding Spirit, a calm voice came over the internal comms. Hull breach, Deck 40, Section 7. Allocate Damage Control Team 3. What the alien scanner saw next baffled them. Instead of the ship going dormant or retreating, small boxy craft shot out of nearby ports. They were utility pods, filled with crews in heavy armored spacesuits. Teams of humans, led by a stoic officer named Choi Dae-yun, swarmed over the breach with tools that seemed archaic. They used cutting lasers, but also physical clamps and hydraulic rams. They hauled prefabricated armor patches from the pods, maneuvered them into place with thruster packs, and began welding. Within 12 minutes, the breach was sealed. The team was still outside, applying a secondary sealant layer. The ship had never stopped moving. Its weapons never ceased tracking. It had simply healed a wound while still in combat. The drones powered down. The rooks returned to their bays. The unyielding Spirit hung in space once more, its new scar a dull gray patch against the darker hull dot. The silence from the alien shuttles was profound. It was no longer the silence of shock, but of deep, recalculating thought. Finally, Commander Vorlak opened a channel. His voice was different. The condescension was gone. In its place was a raw, professional hunger and a trace of unease. Captain Kim, your doctrine is unfamiliar. You take damage we would consider fatal. You use weapons we consider obsolete. Yet the result is undeniable. We would like to understand the theory. We request to send a small technical delegation aboard your vessel. On the bridge of the Supercarrier, Captain Kim Min-seok allowed himself a small, inward smile. The hook was set. They had seen the show. Now they needed to see the machine. And in seeing the machine, they would see the human mind that built it. Permission granted, Commander, Kim said, his voice echoing in the quiet of the vast bridge. Please dock your shuttle at Bay Alpha. We will show you the anvil from the inside. The interior of the unyielding Spirit was not what the alien delegation expected. Commander Volek, flanked by a Tarkellan engineer and accompanied by the curious Kelvari and Thel scientists, had anticipated something crude, perhaps even makeshift. They found the opposite. The corridors were wide, clean and brightly lit. The walls were not smooth. Elegant curves, but heavy, ribbed metal with exposed conduits and piping, all color-coded and neatly labeled. It felt less like a starship and more like the inside of a massive, supremely organized factory. The air smelled faintly of ozone, machine oil, and something else, a green, living scent. They were met by Dr. Kong Hai-jin, the chief engineer. She was a woman with sharp eyes and hands that seemed restless, as if used to holding tools. She wore a simple dark blue jumpsuit, stained in places with lubricant. "Welcome aboard," she said, her tone professional, but not warm. "Please follow me. And mind your step. The floors are designed for traction, not elegance." Their first stop was not the bridge or a weapon control room. It was a hydroponics bay. The doors hissed open to reveal a vast, humid space, several decks high, lit by a simulated sunlight that felt warm on the skin. Rows of lush green plants grew in tiered trays, leafy vegetables, grains, even small fruit trees. The air here was rich with oxygen and moisture. The Kelvari scientist, fascinated by all things biological, clicked excitedly. "You grow your own sustenance? On a warship?" "Of course," Dr. Kong said, plucking a ripe tomato and handing it to the insectoid delegate. The unyielding spirit is designed for century-long deployments if necessary. We recycle all water and organics. We are a closed system. Our life support doesn't depend on external filters or fragile chemical synthesizers that can fail. It is based on biology, the oldest, most reliable technology in the universe. The Thel representative bobbed in its fluid-filled mobile unit, its translator bubbling. A self-sustaining biome. It provides a psychological benefit as well. A piece of home in the void. A piece of survival, Kong corrected gently. Shields can fail. Armor can be breached. But if the crew can eat, drink, can breathe, they can keep fighting. Morale is a secondary benefit. The primary function is endurance. Next, she took them to a power distribution node. It was a cavernous room dominated by 3-story-tall fusion reactors, their low hum a physical vibration in the air. What struck the Tarkellan engineer was not the reactors themselves. The principle was familiar, but the sheer redundancy. Every system was triplicated. If one reactor failed, 2 others could carry the full load. Conduits and cables ran in separate armored channels along different paths through the ship. You have 3 of everything? The Tarkellan engineer asked, his voice full of disbelief. The mass cost? The complexity. The mass is our armor, Kong replied. The complexity is managed. We learned from your own early seafaring history on your homeworld. The ocean is unforgiving. You do not take a ship to sea with only 1 pump or 1 engine. You build in backups for your backups. Space is a deeper, darker ocean. We built a ship that can lose entire sections and still come home. Commander Volek had been silent, his stone-like face observing everything. Finally, he spoke. This philosophy of redundancy, of accepting damage. It is a philosophy of fear. Kong turned her sharp eyes on him. It is a philosophy of history, Commander. We studied the battles of the Concorde. We saw ships beautiful, powerful ships explode when a single shield generator overloaded, or a plasma conduit was severed. You build exquisite glass cannons. We built a sledgehammer. A sledgehammer does not fear breaking a pane of glass. Her words hung in the air. Before Vola could retort, alarms sounded not the blaring sirens of emergency, but a steady 2-tone chime. Drill, Kang explained. Damage control, simulated breach in Sector 9. Would you like to observe? They were led to an observation gallery, overlooking a vast hangar that was not for fighters. It was a machine shop and fabrication bay. The simulated breach alert flashed. Immediately, crews of humans in heavy suits moved with a calm urgency. They did not run in panic. They moved like parts of a well-oiled machine. The delegation watched as Lieutenant Choi Dae-yun, the stoic damage control officer they had seen from a distance during the demonstration, directed his teams. A holographic schematic of a hull breach flickered in the air. Crews gathered materials from organized bins, slabs of composite armor, spools of sealant tape, racks of tools. They loaded them onto small, rugged utility tugs. Your ships have automated repair systems, yes? Kong asked. Of course, Vorlek said. Nanite swarms, molecular welders. We have those too, Kong said, pointing to a team using a precision laser welder. But sometimes the old ways are best. A human with a wrench can fix a problem a nanite swarm cannot understand. And a human does not get disabled by an electromagnetic pulse. She gestured to Daeon's team. They train for this every day. They can patch a breach, reroute critical systems, or even fabricate a replacement part from raw stock, all while under simulated attack. The delegation watched, mesmerized, as the teams worked. It was physical, almost brutal work. It was also incredibly fast and efficient. Within minutes, the simulated breach on the schematic was marked green and sealed. The ship, lives the fell scientist bubbled, its meaning clear. It is not just a tool. It is an organism that can heal itself. That is the idea. Kong nodded. The final part of the tour was the bridge. It was a wide, tiered room, more functional than majestic. Crew stations were arranged in concentric circles, facing massive view screens that showed the starfield and the alien shuttles still floating nearby. At the center stood Captain Kim Min-seok. He offered a short, respectful nod to the delegates. "We have seen your machine, Captain," Morlock said, his earlier arrogance completely gone, replaced by a weary respect. "But a machine reflects the mind of its creator. Why this path? We offered you our technology. You hid away and built this." Captain Kim's gaze was steady. "You offered us a seat at your table, Commander. But before we sat down, we made sure we had our own chair. One we built ourselves, to our own measurements." He walked over to a secondary console and called up a star chart. It was not of the present, but of the past. Our first deep space telescopes, decades before official first contact, detected energy signatures from a conflict in the Xylos system. We watched from 100 light-years away as a fleet engaged a rogue species. He zoomed in on the grainy, reconstructed data. It showed sleek, elegant ships, Darkellan ships, surrounding a less advanced civilization's vessels. We saw their shields fail under a concentrated barrage. We saw the chain reactions as their beautiful ships tore themselves apart. We saw the survivors left adrift, with no life support, because all their systems were integrated. One failure meant total failure. The bridge was silent. The aliens stared at the ancient, blurry images of a forgotten battle, a minor police action in their own history, witnessed by unseen, distant eyes. "We learned the lesson then," Captain Kim said, his voice quiet but filling the room. "Not from your kindness, but from your brutality. We saw that the galaxy's idea of war was powerful, but brittle. So we asked ourselves a simple question. How do you build something that is not brittle? The answer was not in better energy fields. It was in thicker armor, in simpler weapons that never jam, in crews who can fix a leak with their own hands. We built not to fight your wars, Commander. We built to survive them." Vorlak looked from the ancient images of the slaughter his ancestors had wrought to the immense, solid reality of the bridge around him. The sheer, chilling pragmatism of it settled on him. Humanity had not been ignorant. They had been afraid. And from that fear, they had forged the hardest, most resilient tool the galaxy had ever seen. He had come aboard to understand the ship. Now he understood the species. They were not children. They were survivors. And a survivor, he realized with a cold chill, was the most dangerous thing in the universe. The observation lounge aboard the Tarkillan shuttle was opulent, a stark contrast to the brutal functionality of the human carrier. Soft, ambient light glowed from the walls, and a silent holographic fountain shimmered in the corner. But the atmosphere was heavy, thick with unspoken thoughts. The alien delegates stood or sat in small groups, speaking in hushed tones. The images from the human ship, the gardens, the repair bays, the ancient battle records played over and over in their minds. Commander Volok stood apart, staring out a viewport at the unyielding spirit. The monster ship was just a dark shape now, blotting out a section of stars. His stone-like face was impassive, but a muscle twitched near his jaw. The human's words echoed in his skull. "We learned from your brutality." The door hissed open. Park Jun and Lee Yuna entered. They had changed from their formal diplomatic attire into simpler, dark uniforms, similar to those worn on the carrier. The change was subtle, but significant. They were no longer just diplomats from a young world. They were representatives of the will that had built that ship. "Thank you for receiving us," Jun said, his voice breaking the quiet. The delegates turned. The Kelvari clicked a polite greeting. The Thel bubbled in its tank. Vorluk merely turned his head, his black eyes fixed on June. "You have given us much to consider. Diplomat Park," the Thel delegate said, its translator producing soft, watery tones. "Your vessel is a masterpiece of pessimistic engineering." "We prefer realistic," Lee Una said, a faint, hard smile on her lips. Vorluk finally spoke, his voice a low rumble. "Realistic. You speak of a battle from a century past. A necessary action against a species that used asteroid bombs against civilian colonies. You saw a surgical strike and called it brutality. You saw advanced technology and called it weakness. You have built a philosophy on a child's misunderstanding." The room went very still. June met Vorlak's gaze. "Did we misunderstand, Commander?" he asked quietly. The tactical records we eventually accessed after joining the Concorde were quite detailed. The Zelo species shields were overloaded by coordinated fire from 5 of your cruisers. Their power grids failed. Life support ceased across their entire fleet. Over 4,000 beings froze or suffocated in the dark adrift. Your report listed it as total tactical efficacy. We read that as total vulnerability. If a single system's failure means the death of a crew, then that system is a flaw. We decided not to have that flaw. "So you built a fortress that crawls," Vorluk shot back. "A slow, ugly thing that wins by outlasting its opponent. It is a strategy of defense, not of victory." "Is there a difference?" Una countered, her voice sharp. "When the enemy is the Void Swarm? Do they care about elegance? They do not take territory. They consume. The only way to win is to survive, to last longer than they do, to be the thing they break their teeth on." She stepped forward, her datapad in her hand. "You asked to see a human warship that could withstand a particle beam. You have seen it, but you still don't understand it. The ship isn't the weapon, Commander." She tapped her pad, and a new set of images, different from the ancient battle, appeared in the air above the fountain. These were schematics, but not of machines. They were organizational charts, logistical maps, training curricula. "The weapon," Una said, "is the crew. Captain Kim, Dr. Kong, Lieutenant Choi, pilots like Lieutenant Park. The ship is just the tool they hold. We don't have the most advanced tech in the galaxy. We have the most adaptable, the most stubborn, and the most collectively resilient minds. A Tarkelian warship requires a specialized academy graduate at every station. On our ship, every sailor is cross-trained in 2 other critical functions. A gunner can help in the hydroponics bay. A welder from engineering can man a point defense laser. We are redundant in our flesh and blood, not just in our metal." June took over, his tone softer, but no less firm. "You proposed a unified fleet under a single centralized command. We counter-propose a coalition, a true partnership. Not because we wish to challenge your authority, Commander, but because our strength is different. Your fleets are the swift, sharp sword, the unyielding spirit, and the ships we will build like her. We are the shield, the anvil. Let the swarm come against us. Let them waste their fury trying to crack our hull. And while they are fixed on us, your swift swords and the ships of the Kelvari and the Thel and all the others can strike from the flanks. You can do what you do best, maneuver, outthink, exploit. We will do what we do best, endure." The idea hung in the air, a complete inversion of the galactic military norm. In Concorde warfare, the shield was an energy barrier, a temporary thing. The idea of a ship whose primary role was to be hit, to deliberately draw fire and survive, was bizarre. But against an enemy like the swarm, a mindless devourer, it was also shockingly logical. The Kelvar scientist clicked thoughtfully. Symbiosis. The predator and the coral. The swarm attacks the hard, unyielding coral, and the predator fish pick off the attackers. A viable ecosystem of war. Vorluk was silent for a long time. He looked from the human organizational charts to the dark silhouette of the carrier outside. He had spent his life believing that technological superiority, speed, and firepower were the only truths in combat. The humans had introduced a fourth ancient variable, sheer, bloody-minded toughness. He thought of his own ships, their beautiful lines, their powerful but delicate shield generators. He imagined them swarmed by the void, their systems overloading one by one. Then he imagined that dark, ugly human vessel, sitting like a rock in a tidal wave, weathering the assault, its simple weapons firing again and again, its crews patching holes as they were made. It was not a glorious vision. It was a grim one, but it was a vision of survival. An anvil, Vorluk repeated, the word tasting strange. You would truly take that role? You would stand and be struck for the good of the fleet? We would stand, June confirmed. Not just for the fleet. For Earth. This ship was built to protect our home. If standing as the galaxy's anvil does that, then we will stand. Vorluk gave a slow, single nod. It was not a nod of agreement to a treaty, not yet. It was a nod of recognition. He finally saw the full picture. Humanity's hidden project wasn't just a ship. It was a statement of identity. They were not warriors who sought glorious charges. They were guardians, stubborn and unimaginably patient, who would dig in and hold the line until the end of time. He turned to his own comms officer. Open a channel to the Hegemony Command. Priority signal. He looked back at June and Yuna. The demonstration is over. The conversation, however, is just beginning. The Concord must hear this proposal, this theory of the anvil and the sword. As Vorluk began speaking in low tones to his superiors, June felt a wave of cautious relief. The gambit had worked. They were no longer being dismissed. They were being considered as a serious, if bizarre, part of the solution. Yuna moved to stand beside him, also watching the alien delegates talk animatedly among themselves. They're scared of it, she whispered. And they're scared of what it says about us. June nodded, still looking at the unyielding spirit, a piece of his home hidden in the dark for decades, now finally revealed. Good, he said softly. Let them be scared. Better scared and alive than comfortable and eaten. The grand chamber of the Unity Spire was packed. Word of the human supercarrier had spread like a shockwave through the galactic networks. This session was no longer just a routine Concord meeting. It was a historical event. Every delegate was present, their eyes fixed on the central holographic platform where images of the unyielding spirit, its kinetic weapon tests, and its damage control crews still played in a silent loop. Commander Vorluk stood at the Tarkeelan podium. The atmosphere was different. The arrogance was gone, replaced by a grave professional seriousness. The data from the human soul system has been verified, he announced, his voice carrying to the far corners of the silent chamber. The vessel designated Unyielding Spirit is operational. Its capabilities, while unorthodox, are formidable within their specific doctrinal framework. He did not smile. He did not compliment. But from Vorluk, this was a thunderous endorsement. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Park June stood at the humble human podium. He waited for the room to quiet. The galaxy faces an enemy that does not negotiate, he began, his calm voice a contrast to the tension in the room. The void swarm does not care for our politics, our borders, or our different schools of warfare. It only consumes. In the face of this, a single rigid command structure is a single point of failure. He gestured, and the hologram changed. It showed a simplified tactical display. A dense red cloud representing the swarm advanced. Before it was a single large blue icon, the unyielding spirit. Flanking it were dozens of smaller, agile green icons, Tarkellen cruisers, Kelvari bioships, Fel hydrovessels. Unity does not require uniformity, June continued. The hegemony's proposed unified fleet asked all species to fight the same way. We propose a coalition fleet. Let each species fight to its strength. Your ships, he nodded to Vorlek and the others, are the galaxy's finest swords, fast, sharp, and lethal. Use them as such. The hologram sprang to life. The red swarm crashed against the blue anvil. The human icon flashed as it was struck, but it held its position. As the swarm writhed around it, trying to envelop it, the green flanking icons struck. They slashed in, harried the edges, cut off tendrils of the red cloud, and darted away. The unyielding spirit and the ships we will build like her, June said, will be the anvil. Our purpose is to be the target, to draw the swarm's attack, to endure its fury and fix it in place. While it is focused on trying to break us, your fleets will be free to cut it apart. The display ended. The chamber was utterly silent for 3 full seconds. Then, a wave of conversation, loud and excited, broke out. The visual was so simple, so clear. It offered a role for everyone. It played to human stubbornness and galactic technological prowess. It was not a human takeover. It was a human sacrifice play on a grand scale. The Kelvar delegate clicked loudly for attention. The human model offers tactical synergy. The swarm is a mindless predator. It will attack the largest, closest threat. The human vessel can be that threat. This is acceptable. The Fel bubbled agreement. We have seen its durability. It can fulfill the role. We consent to the coalition model. One by one, the lesser species, who had feared being absorbed into the Tarkellen war machine, voiced their support. They saw in humanity not a new master, but a powerful, immovable ally. The tide turned irrevocably. Volek, seeing the consensus, gave a final, decisive nod from his podium. The old proposal was dead. Within weeks, the first Galactic Coalition fleet was assembled. It was a strange and magnificent sight near the frontier world of Cygnus Prime. Sleek silver, Tarkellen battlecruisers floated beside the organic, chrysalis-like ships of the Kelvari. The fluid-filled spheres of the Fel navigated between them. And in the center, like a dark, rugged mountain, sat the unyielding spirit. It looked like a relic among jewels, but its presence was a gravitational pull. Steadying the entire formation, Dot Captain Kim Min-seok stood on his bridge. The tactical screen showed the allied ships, their icons flickering with data streams. All stations, battle readiness. This is not a drill. Remember your roles. We are the rock. Let the river break around us. On the Tarkellen flagship, Commander Volek studied the same network. The swarm signal was approaching fast. All cruiser groups, pattern Delta, he commanded, his voice calm. We strike the flanks. Do not engage the core. Leave that to the human. The void swarm emerged from its jump point. It was a seething, chaotic mass of biomechanical horrors, jagged ships the size of asteroids, swarms of smaller fighters like metallic insects, all moving with a terrifying, single-minded hunger. They detected the fleet, and as predicted, their collective mind fixated on the largest energy signature, the unyielding spirit. They rushed towards it, a tidal wave of chitin and plasma. All hands, brace for impact, Captain Kim said. The storm hit. Plasma bolts, acid projectiles, and kinetic rammers slammed into the carrier's hull. The ship shuddered, a deep, groaning vibration that ran through every deck. Alarms sounded for real this time, but the voices reporting damage were controlled. Port armor, Sector 2, significant ablation. No breach. Point defense clusters Alpha through Gamma report full expenditure. Reloading. Minor fire on Deck 20. Containment teams responding. The human ship did not explode. It did not flash with failing shields. It simply weathered the onslaught, its thick armor glowing red-hot in places, but holding. And as it held, it fired back. A storm of kinetic rods and missiles lanced out, not aimed with precision, but saturating the space directly in front of it, turning the leading edge of the swarm into a cloud of debris. Now, Vorlok commanded. The Allied fleets, unburdened by the main force's attention, swept in from the sides. Tarkellan plasma lances sliced through swarm tendrils. Kelvari bioacid melted enemy hulls. Fell sonic disruptors caused whole groups of swarm fighters to shudder and collide. They were nimble, effective, and deadly. They fought the war they knew how to fight, because the humans were fighting a war of attrition no one else could endure. On the bridge of the unyielding spirit, Lieutenant Park Subin coordinated her squadrons of rooks. They flew out, not into the heart of the swarm, but along its edges, working with Tarkellan interceptors in a clumsy but effective dance. Focus fire on the big ones near the Fell group. She barked, her voice clear over the coms. A human pilot, hearing a Tarkellan wing leader's warning, banked hard, taking a hit on his armored flank to protect the more fragile alien ship. The battle was not without cost. A Tarkellan cruiser, overextended, had its shields overloaded and was torn apart. But the loss was one of many in a fluid battle, not the catastrophic chain reaction that usually followed a shield failure. The human anvil held the swarm's focus, allowing the Allied swords to cut and cut again. After what felt like an eternity, the swarm's movements became erratic. Its numbers were decimated. Its central mass had been pulverized against the unyielding human ship. A retreat signal, not from a leader, but from a crippled hive mind instinct, pulsed through the remaining swarm vessels. They broke away, scattering into the void. Silence settled over the battlefield, broken only by damage reports and rescue beacons. On the Tarkellan flagship, Vorlok looked at the tactical screen. The swarm was gone. The coalition fleet, though battered, was victorious. His eyes went to the icon of the unyielding spirit. It was scarred, venting atmosphere from a few minor breaches, its weapon banks partially depleted. But its power signature remained strong and steady. It was not just intact. It was operational. He opened a fleet-wide channel. His voice, when it came, held a note no one had ever heard from a Tarkellan commander to a human before. Deep, unequivocal respect. Coalition fleet, this is Commander Vorlok. The enemy is in retreat. The Cygnus Prime corridor is secure. He paused. Human vessel unyielding spirit. Your station was held. Well done. On the human bridge, the crew allowed themselves a moment of quiet celebration. Captain Kin Min-seok looked at the view screen, at the Allied ships regrouping around his battered, victorious carrier. He saw not just ships, but a new future being forged in the fire of battle. He keyed his own comms, his reply simple, echoing through every ship in the new galactic fleet. Thank you, Commander. The anvil is ready. Whenever you need to strike again,